Can you believe that some of the most impactful events in the history of humanity were made in the 11th hour? Yes, true. Someone or a group made a last-minute decision that changed the fate of millions of people from then forth. Some of the most significant historical events were not made in boardrooms after months of consultative meetings. Last-minute decisions shape the world in a good or in a bad way. In this video, we'll explore 15 of the most significant last-minute decisions that have impacted the world as we know it. Welcome to Untold History Guy, where you can find fun, fascinating, and sometimes shocking chronicles of history. Join us as we journey back and uncover the untold truths of the past. Number 1. The Hiroshima and Nagasaki nuclear bombs. You cannot think of World War II and fail to consider what happened in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. But do you know that a nuclear bomb would not have hit Nagasaki were it not for a last-minute decision? That's right. The original plan was to bomb Kokura and Hiroshima. However, when it was time to bomb Kokura, Officer Kermit Behan decided that they would bomb Nagasaki because he realized that there would be cloud cover over Kokura that affected visibility. For Behan, choosing which people should die was like choosing between a hot dog and a hamburger at a cookout. And just like that, Kokura was saved and Nagasaki was doomed in one of the worst events in history because of a last-minute decision. Number 2. The fall of the Berlin Wall. One of the most interesting events in history is the fall of the Berlin Wall. It's laughable and annoying at the same time. Can you believe that the wall was brought down by a last-minute decision from an officer who was too lazy to read a memo? Günther Schabowski was the spokesperson for the East German Politburo, but failed to read a memo before his press conference. When he appeared at the press conference, he announced that the Politburo had allowed everybody to cross the wall. He must have been high. With no information about the decisions of the Politburo and timelines for executions, he decided that the order should be executed immediately. Within no time, citizens began demolishing it, and that is how his last-minute decision impacted the history of the fall of the Berlin Wall. Number 3. Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech. Did you know that one of the most famous quotes and speeches in the history of humanity was a last-minute decision? That's right. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was preparing to deliver a speech before the Lincoln Memorial on August 28, 1963. He even had copies of his speech distributed to the press. A few minutes into reading the speech, he paused and began to give a different speech from the one he had written. The split-second decision to abandon his written speech was inspired by his friend and gospel singer Mahalia Jackson, who shouted, "Tell him about the dream, Martin." So a last-minute decision resulted in the most memorable quotes and speeches. I think I need more friends who can shout while I'm making a speech. Number 4. The sinking of the Titanic. The sinking of the Titanic is one of the most devastating events in the history of the world, and one of the worst tragic accidents in naval history. But did you know that the sinking of the mighty ship was caused by a last-minute decision to remove Second Officer David Blair from the crew? David Blair, a second officer in the ship, was in possession of keys to a locker containing binoculars. The binoculars were vital in looking out for icebergs and avoiding them. However, when he was removed from the crew, he left the keys in his uniform, and no one knew where they were. The crew resorted to using their naked eyes to look out for icebergs. I wonder how they thought that was going to work at night. Well, it didn't, and the last minute to remove Blair from the crew contributed significantly to the sinking of the mighty Titanic. Number 5. Aversion of nuclear crisis by President J.F. Kennedy. A nuclear war is no child's play, and hundreds of thousands of people are deemed to perish if it happens. Additionally, cities would be destroyed, and the effects would be felt for several decades. Picture a Hiroshima and Nagasaki scenario on steroids. This is exactly what President J.F. Kennedy's last-minute decision was able to stop. During the 1962 Cuba Missile Crisis, the Pentagon agreed unanimously that an invasion of Cuba was the best option since there was an imminent threat from the Soviet Union nuclear missiles positioned in Cuba. Invading Cuba and destroying the missiles was seen as the only way to avert the danger. However, President J.F. Kennedy made a last-minute decision against the Pentagon and the military officials. Unknown to him, Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev forbade the use of the missiles unless he authorized it. If the U.S. had invaded Cuba, no doubt a nuclear war would have ensued. Kennedy earned his nuclear crisis dodger title that day. Number 6. Change in the Pacific during World War II. World War II is one of the most significant events in history. It provides a major reference for fighting strategies in case World War III erupts. The Japanese commanders made a last-minute decision in the Pacific, leading to their massive defeat. The Japanese Admiral Chuichi Nagumo made a last-minute decision that caused a massive defeat by the Americans. The Japanese were preparing to continue their attack on Midway Island. However, they discovered American destroyers nearby and decided to attack them instead of the island. Nagumo is like one friend who suddenly changes their mind on game night and messes up the whole plan. They ran out of fuel, and while refueling and unprepared for the attack, the American destroyers engaged them, and 3 of the 4 Japanese aircraft carriers were annihilated in just 5 minutes. I guess that was the worst running out of fuel experience. Number 7. The decision to carry a speech in the breast pocket saved a president's life. President Theodore Roosevelt opted out of his presidential race, but later continued. To convince his supporters of his decision to be back, he made a 50-page speech. Was he writing a novel? As he left the hotel in the evening, he decided to fold the speech in 2 and carry it in his breast pocket instead of putting it in his briefcase as usual. He must have appeared to have one breast. If you ask me, a 50-page speech in a presidential candidate's pocket was ridiculous. But as absurd as it may sound, the decision to place it there saved his life. Just outside the hotel, a shooter aimed at his heart. Luckily, the folded speech slowed the bullet and never killed him. He made the speech with a bullet in his body. That's the only life-saving speech I know about. Number 8. Right to legal counsel for defendants. The United States Supreme Court in Gideon v. Wainwright in 1963 made a last-minute decision establishing legal rights for all defendants in criminal cases. The court made the unprecedented last-minute decision just before it concluded its term for that year. The right to counsel in criminal cases was only guaranteed for defendants charged with capital offenses. However, in Gideon v. Wainwright, the Supreme Court expanded the right to counsel to include all defendants, regardless of the offense they were charged with. This decision changed the criminal justice system in the United States. I guess it's the only time the court created massive employment. Number 9. Marie Antoinette's execution. Marie Antoinette is famed for the saying, "Let them eat cake." It was rumored that she had said this when she was informed that people were starving because they did not have bread. During this time, a revolution ensued, and Marie Antoinette and her husband, King Louis XVI, were planning to escape. I hope they carried some cake. The Queen made a last-minute decision against the counsel of her advisors. General François-Claude Bouillet recommended that they use different carriages to enhance their disguise. But because Marie Antoinette insisted on riding in the royal carriage, they were captured by armed villagers who recognized them. Talk about bad luck. They were eventually executed. Number 10. Stanislav Petrovs' aversion to nuclear war. In September 1983, Stanislav Petrov was on a night shift and on the lookout for any missile attacks. During the night, his computer indicated that 5 American missiles were headed in his country's direction. It looked like they were in for a real fireworks show. His colleagues urged him to report it so that they could take a defensive position and retaliate against the US. However, he made a last-minute decision not to report, but instead to make a confirmation of the attacks. Wait a minute, this must have been the calmest soldier ever. Who goes, "Hold on, guys," when he's about to get hit by nuclear missiles? It was then that he realized that the computer had malfunctioned, and that his last-minute decision to confirm before reporting averted a nuclear war. Number 11. The 1930 Salt March in India. The decision by Mahatma Gandhi to lead the Salt March in India in 1930 can be considered a last-minute decision in the sense that it was not part of the original plan for the civil disobedience campaign against British colonial rule in India. When the British introduced a salt tax, Mahatma Gandhi made a last-minute decision to conduct a march. It was like Gandhi's version of a spontaneous road trip. The protest changed the struggle for independence in India and eventually brought down British rule. Number 12. The decision by Nelson Mandela to pursue reconciliation and forgiveness. When Nelson Mandela was finally released from prison, South Africans were ready for revenge against their oppressors. They all saw it as an opportunity for Mandela to pursue those who imprisoned him. It was like the nation had its popcorn ready, expecting a juicy showdown. However, he led the nation to the path of reconciliation and forgiveness. Most South Africans made a last-minute decision against their plans to revenge. The country enjoyed peace, and Mandela and South Africa's decision changed the course of history for the country. Number 13. The decision to drop nuclear bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The decision to drop the atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki during World War II was a last-minute decision because it was not initially part of the original plan to end the war. Somebody must have made a wicked suggestion. Let's end the war with a bang. On July 25, 1945, the decision was made during the Potsdam Conference to drop the atomic bomb to bring about a swift end to the war and change the course of history forever. Number 14. Archduke Franz Ferdinand changed his route in Sarajevo. A last-minute decision to change the route taken by Archduke Franz Ferdinand in Sarajevo on June 28, 1914, changed the history of the world because it directly led to his assassination and ignited a chain of events that ultimately triggered World War I. Stick to your initial route, or you might cause a world war. Number 15. The decision by Rosa Parks to refuse to give up her seat on the bus. Rosa Parks, an African-American woman, was returning home from work on December 1, 1955, when she was asked to give up her seat on a bus to a white passenger because it was the norm during the segregation laws of the time. Her refusal led to the civil rights movement. I guess stubbornness pays sometimes. So, what do you think about these last-minute decisions? Which one of these decisions surprises you the most? Let us know in the comments below, and while you're at it, check out some of these other videos from our channel.